always believed love was supposed to feel like a partnership. That when two people promised to build a life together, it meant both voices mattered, both dreams intertwined, and both sacrifices carried weight. But I learned far too painfully that some people never see love as anything more than a transaction. And once I saw the truth, I couldn't unsee it. My name is Elise. I'm 30 years old, and for 3 years I thought I had found the man I would grow old with. He wasn't perfect, but I loved him. I gave him my time, my trust, my heart. I let myself believe that even though his family was wealthy, old money country club wealth that drips arrogance, he was different. I convinced myself he saw me, not just my background, not just what I could or couldn't give. But then came the prenup meeting, the day that split my life in two, before and after. The room was cold, though not in temperature. Cold in the way his father smirked across the table, cold in the way the lawyer's voice droned as though I were an inconvenience rather than a bride-to-be. And coldest of all in the way my fiancé, my supposed partner, refused to look me in the eye. At first it seemed standard, protecting his family's existing wealth, their estates, their assets. I understood that. I didn't come from money. I wasn't after theirs. But as the clauses piled up, the mask began to slip. Anything he earned, inherited, or was given during the marriage, solely his, entirely untouchable. My earnings, marital property, but even then tangled with conditions. If I ever started a business, he'd get a share. His businesses always and forever his. And then came the sentence that hollowed me out. His lawyer said it plainly, but it was his voice that cut me open. You can't touch my money, it's all mine. Not our money, not our future, just his, all his. I looked at him, waiting for some sign that he didn't mean it, that the lawyer was exaggerating, that the cold disdain in his tone was just nerves. But he met my eyes, and in them I didn't see love. I saw calculation, superiority. A flash of disdain, as though I had overstepped by daring to imagine equality. In that moment something inside me broke and something else was born. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to reconsider. I just smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that even his father's arrogance couldn't shake. And then I stood, smoothed my dress, and said quietly, "This has been illuminating. I don't think we have anything further to discuss." And I walked out. My lawyer followed me, stunned. My fiancé sat frozen, perhaps expecting me to collapse into apologies, to plead for scraps of his so-called generosity. But I didn't look back. Because when a man tells you who he is, you believe him. The days that followed felt surreal. I left our apartment that night, packed a small bag, and stayed with a friend. His text came first, short, frantic, demanding, "We need to talk. This isn't funny. You're embarrassing me." Then came the voicemails, his tone wobbling between rage and desperation. But not once did he say "I love you." Instead, he said his father was furious. That the invitations had already gone out. That his mother was having kittens over what people would say. That I needed to fix this. Fix it. As if the betrayal had been mine. As if love could survive being told I was never his partner, just an accessory. And then his father called. His voice dripping with disdain. He told me I was impulsive, disrespectful, dramatic. That marriage was just business. That I was throwing away a wonderful future over a piece of paper. I bit back the urge to scream. Because to me it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a mirror reflecting exactly how little I mattered to them. I ended the call with shaking hands but a steady heart. Because in that moment I realized they had already decided who I was. Disposable. Replaceable. Not a partner, but a burden to be managed. And I refused to live my life begging for scraps of respect. So I began untangling myself, canceling deposits I had made, withdrawing my name from contracts, severing ties piece by piece, even as he and his family raged. Each step felt like peeling away a layer of illusion, each cancellation another reminder that I was reclaiming myself. But what came next proved just how deep their betrayal went. The backlash came swift and merciless. By the second week I realized I hadn't just walked out on a man, I had defied an entire dynasty. His family wasn't used to being challenged, and certainly not by someone like me. The first strike came through whispers. Friends of friends suddenly grew cold, their eyes darting away when I entered a room. Invitations that once arrived weekly disappeared overnight. My social media flooded with vague posts, comments about gold diggers, ungrateful women, girls who can't handle a real man. I didn't need names. I knew exactly where it came from. His family had launched their smear campaign, and they were determined to paint me as the villain. Then came the financial blows. A florist called to say my card for wedding arrangements had been maxed out. Confused, I checked my account's charges appeared that weren't mine. Lavish purchases at boutiques his mother adored. When I confronted the bank, they said my card had been used by someone with access to our shared information. Someone who had once sworn he loved me. I sat at my kitchen table that night, hands shaking, heart pounding. Rage battled with despair. It wasn't enough that they had humiliated me at that prenup meeting. They wanted to gut me, strip me of dignity, crush me into silence. And beneath it all was the most unbearable question of all. Had he loved me at all? Or had I been nothing more than a pawn in his family's endless game of power? But betrayal has a strange way of clarifying things. It burned away the illusions I had clung to, leaving behind something harder, sharper. I realized that every attack they launched only proved one thing: they were afraid. Afraid that the truth would spread. Afraid that their carefully polished reputation would crack. And then, just when I thought I had endured the worst, a new twist landed in my lap. A message arrived from an unfamiliar number. At first I ignored it, another stranger parroting their lies, I assumed. But the words stopped me cold. You're not the first. He did the same thing to me. Check the prenup his father drafted in 2016. My stomach dropped. I replied cautiously, and the woman revealed herself. A former fiancé. She had once stood exactly where I had, ring on her finger, heart full of hope, only to be gutted by the same cold words, the same paper fortress his family used to trap women. You can't touch his money. It's all his. The difference was she had signed, and she paid dearly for it. When her marriage crumbled 2 years later, she walked away with nothing. No home, no savings, not even the small business she had poured her soul into, because his father's clauses had ensured it reverted to their family. Her voice trembled as she confessed she had stayed silent out of shame, but watching me walk out had sparked something in her. You were braver than I was, she whispered. But please don't let them get away with this again. I sat in silence, the weight of her words crushing and liberating all at once. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was part of a pattern, a long trail of women silenced, erased, discarded by a family who saw marriage as ownership and love as leverage. And suddenly I knew I couldn't just walk away quietly. I had to fight back. I began to dig. Through public records, through whispers of past relationships, through every loose thread their arrogance had left dangling. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were 3 other women before me. 3 women who had been seduced, promised love-handed contracts, and then left hollowed out. Each of them isolated, each story buried beneath shame. And at the center of it all, his father drafting contracts, like weapons, grooming his son into a mirror image of himself. This wasn't just betrayal, it was generational. A dynasty built not on love but on conquest. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every woman who had ever been caught in their snare. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror that night. My eyes were swollen from tears, my face pale from exhaustion, but beneath it all burned something fierce, a quiet, unshakable determination. They wanted me broken, they wanted me silent, but I was done being their pawn. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't screaming or burning bridges. Sometimes it's telling the truth so loudly, so clearly that their lies can never survive it. And I was ready to tell it all. The more I uncovered, the more the puzzle came together, and the picture it revealed was uglier than I could have ever imagined. Their family had a history of using marriage as a transaction, not just with me or the women before me, but spanning decades. Old newspaper clippings and archived society columns painted the same story again and again: unions made for wealth, alliances strengthened by contracts, women praised for their beauty and then discarded when their usefulness ran dry. I thought back to the way his father smirked across the table during the prenup meeting, his voice dripping with arrogance as though he'd already won. He wasn't protecting his son, he was grooming him, grooming him to continue a legacy built on power, manipulation, and control. My fiancé wasn't just a participant, he was an apprentice. But the part that shattered me most was a discovery buried in a family court record from years ago. One of the women, the second fiancé, had tried to fight back. She had contested the prenup in court, presenting evidence of coercion. But she lost. And when I read the transcripts, I understood why. Their lawyer was the same one I'd seen that day, reading clauses with a dead voice, protecting their empire like it was sacred scripture. They had perfected the system. And I realized if I had stayed, if I had signed, I would have been destroyed in the exact same way. The knowledge filled me with both grief and fury. Grief for the women who had been silenced before me. Fury that this family thought they were untouchable. But as I stared at the stack of documents I'd gathered, I also felt something new: resolve. And then the real twist arrived. My father, who had always remained quiet about my engagement, who never openly approved or disapproved, called me one evening after hearing whispers about the broken engagement. His voice was uncharacteristically heavy. "Elise," he said quietly, "there's something I never told you. About their family. About your mother." The words sent ice through my veins. He told me that years ago, long before I was born, his own sister had been engaged to my ex's uncle. And just like me, she had been given a contract. A prenup so suffocating, so humiliating, that she walked away at the altar. The fallout had been brutal rumors, disgrace, a permanent fracture between families. My aunt had disappeared overseas, her name erased from family conversations, and now decades later, without knowing it, I had stepped straight into the same trap. It wasn't coincidence, it was history repeating itself. I sat there in stunned silence, my father's words echoing in my head. No wonder his family had looked at me with such disdain. No wonder his mother had glared as if I were unworthy before I even opened my mouth. To them, I wasn't just Elise. I was a reminder. A ghost of a betrayal they had never forgiven. And suddenly everything clicked into place. The cold stares, the prenup harsher than any standard contract, the calculated cruelty. They weren't just protecting their wealth. They were avenging an old wound, punishing me for a sin I had never committed. The realization made my skin crawl, but it also gave me clarity. I was never going to be accepted. I was never going to be loved by that family. To them, I was just another pawn in a generational feud, a scapegoat to carry the weight of grudges older than I was. But if they thought I would crumble under the same pressure that broke the women before me, they were wrong. I started to prepare not just for myself, but for every woman they had wronged. I reached out to the former fiancés one by one. I told them my story and they told me theirs. The pain in their voices was raw, but so was the strength. And together we began piecing together a bigger story. A pattern. A legacy of exploitation hiding behind designer suits and manicured smiles. I realized then that my revenge wouldn't be personal, it would be collective. It wouldn't be about tearing down just one man. It would be about ending the illusion that this family could keep destroying lives in silence. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't end with heartbreak. Sometimes it awakens something far more powerful. And in me, it had awakened a fire. The fire inside me grew into something I could no longer contain. I wasn't just Elise, the woman scorned at a prenup table. I had become the keeper of stories no one else dared to tell, the witness to a legacy of exploitation hidden behind marble walls and expensive champagne. The women I reached out to were hesitant at first. Each of them had scars. Each of them had spent years convincing themselves to stay silent. But when they realized they weren't alone, when they heard their pain echoed in my voice, something shifted. We met in secret, first over late-night calls. Then in quiet cafes, always looking over our shoulders, as though the family's shadow could still reach us. Each of us carried evidence. Bank statements, contracts, testimonies, whispers from lawyers who had grown uncomfortable, but never spoken out. Piece by piece, we built a file that told the truth their money had buried for years. It was more than betrayal, it was systemic cruelty, a machine designed to lure, consume, and discard women under the guise of tradition. And still the family fought. My ex showed up one evening outside my apartment, his expensive suit crumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He begged. Then he threatened, his voice breaking between desperation and fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You're ruining everything. My parents will never forgive me if you don't come back. Elise, please. Don't do this." For a moment I almost saw the man I once loved in his trembling voice. But then I remembered the way he had looked at me across that table, cold and proud, as he said, "You can't touch my money. It's all mine." That was the truth. This was just fear. I didn't answer him, I simply closed the door. But behind the door my hands shook. Because part of me still wanted to crumble, to give in to the lie that maybe if I forgave it would hurt less. That maybe I could pretend it had never happened. Yet another part of me, the stronger part, knew forgiveness here wasn't healing. It was surrender. And I would not surrender. The turning point came when one of the former fiancés, the one who had lost her business, finally agreed to go public. She had been terrified for years, convinced the family would ruin her all over again. But when she saw the evidence we had collected, when she realized she wasn't the only one, her fear turned into resolve. We contacted a journalist. Not just any journalist, but one who had been circling stories about wealthy families and their hidden rot for years. At first even she hesitated. This family was powerful, their lawyers ruthless. But when she saw the documents, the testimonies, the photographs, she leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. This is bigger than I thought. You're not just telling your story, you're breaking their entire illusion. The article dropped like a thunderclap. Headlines splashed across screens: "Dynasty of Deception, the dark side of a wealthy family's marriages." Their pristine image shattered overnight. Social media exploded with outrage, women from other circles stepping forward with their own encounters. Suddenly the family wasn't untouchable anymore. They were exposed, fragile under the weight of their own sins. But the true climax came at their own gathering. A charity gala meant to polish their reputation ended in chaos when protesters appeared outside, holding signs with words like "Predators and Prada" and "Love is not a contract." Cameras swarmed, and for once the family couldn't hide behind their walls. My ex stood on stage, pale and sweating, his mother's face rigid with fury, his father gripping a glass too tightly. I didn't need to be there to know they felt it, the sting of being seen for what they truly were. And me, I watched from home, tears streaming down my face. Not from grief this time, but from vindication. The truth was finally louder than their lies. In that moment, I understood something I wish I had known sooner. Betrayal doesn't end you. It reveals them, and sometimes it gives you the strength to end the cycle for everyone who comes after. The gala was only the beginning. Once the story broke, the silence that had protected them for generations collapsed like a house of cards. Women I had never met before found the courage to speak. Some had been fiancés like me, others girlfriends discarded when they stopped being convenient, and even a few wives who had endured years of quiet humiliation because they were too afraid to leave. Each voice added to the chorus, each story a mirror reflecting the same pattern: control, contracts, and calculated betrayal. The family tried to fight back. Their lawyers threatened defamation suits. Their PR team scrambled to spin the story as jealous exes and attention seekers. My ex even released a statement dripping with false humility, claiming he had been misunderstood, that he valued partnership, but had been pressured by his parents. But it was too late. The world had already seen behind the curtain, and no carefully crafted statement could erase the stain of truth. The fallout was swift. Business partners pulled away. Invitations dried up. Their pristine social status, once unshakable, crumbled into whispers of scandal. And for the first time they felt what they had made so many women feel: disposable, unwanted, stripped of dignity. As for me, the aftermath was quieter. There were no parades, no celebrations, just a deep, aching relief that sat heavy in my chest. Some nights I still woke with the echo of his voice in my ears. "You can't touch my money. It's all mine." But instead of breaking me, the memory hardened me. It reminded me why I had walked away, why I had fought, why I had refused to be silenced. One evening, as I sat with the women who had joined me in this fight, I looked around the table and realized something important. None of us had gotten back what we lost. The years, the trust, the innocence, they were gone. But what we had gained was something far more powerful: each other. We were no longer isolated victims carrying secret shame. We were survivors who had found our voices, and in that realization I found peace. I don't tell this story because I enjoy reliving the pain. I tell it because betrayal thrives in silence, because there are women out there right now sitting at a table staring at a contract, hearing the same words I once heard, and believing they are powerless. I tell it because I want them to know you are not powerless. You are not crazy. You are not alone. Love is not ownership. Partnership is not control. And anyone who tells you otherwise is not a partner, they are a cage. So if you're watching this, if my story resonates with you, let it be a reminder. You always have a choice. You can walk away. You can start over. You can burn the script they hand you and write your own. If my story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like mine. And if you've ever faced betrayal and found the courage to rise, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Because the more we speak, the less power betrayal has over us.